All right, no worries. Well, did anyone have any burning questions on their heart that I could throw the mic at them for?
Yeah, thanks. Really good talk. My question is that I've heard that everyone is called to chastity, including married couples. Can you shed light on that?
Yeah. John Paul II, when he was doing his weekly audiences, so the Pope, I don't know if you know, the Pope every Wednesday gets to speak to the public, the press are there and everything, on any topic he wants for 20 minutes. Now, John Paul II, when he became Pope, immediately started into revisiting exactly the topic we're talking about tonight, because he saw that the sexual revolution had taken place within secular culture, and that merely a cold transmitting of do this and don't do that was not reaching through to people. So he said there needed to be something like a revolution in deepening and transmitting the church's understanding of our sexuality. So he then spent the next 3 years every week talking about this topic. The press gave it no attention whatsoever, except for 1 week, when he was commenting on Jesus' words in the Sermon on the Mount. You've heard it said that you shall not commit adultery, but I say to you, anyone who looks on another person with lust in his heart has already committed adultery. And what John Paul II was saying was that this shows that there isn't two states in life. The married person who gets to do whatever they want, let loose ends, and the unmarried person who can't do anything. John Paul II said it is possible to lust after your wife. If you treat your wife as an object, you're lusting after her. Now that made the paper. All of a sudden, people said, you know, even the Pope's not even letting married couples off. You can sin with your own wife, you know. Now, what's the point he's trying to get at here is that when we're dealing with issues of the human heart and mind, there's no safe environments where you can just decide to let loose. There's no sexual boxing rings. You know, you don't kind of walk into a room and say, oh, good, we're in the right place. Is this the bedroom? Good. Okay, let's get it done properly. I feel like this. When we're dealing with other people, we always have to treat them as subjects. In other words, they have to be treated with dignity. Now, if this was reported the right way, someone could say that this was the greatest boost for feminism ever, because what the Pope is saying is just because you're married to this person doesn't give you the right to do whatever you want to them. And he spoke specifically about, for example, women looking for excuses to say no to their husbands. And you've got the classic example of Al Bundy trying to crack onto Peg, or Homer trying to crack onto Marge, and they say, oh, I've got a headache, oh, I can't tonight. And what he's saying is that these women implicitly know they're being used and they don't want to be used, you know, but it wasn't reported that way. So you might say chastity is a virtue which has to deal with using our reason to control our emotional desires for sexual pleasure. And it's an important point to notice that it's a virtue. In other words, it takes time to develop, but it's also a key part of what it means to be a happy human being. Now, the reason why chastity seems to have gone by the wayside is because now we're coming across more and more ways that we can use technology to avoid having to develop virtues. Now, let me give you an example. Say I've got a problem with anger, right? I've just got a really short temper, and when I get really, really angry, I've just got to kick something in the next 10 seconds. Now, all of you would say that Christians got a problem with anger, you know? Now, does it make a difference if I go outside and kick the daylights out of something which is not breaking, and I come and put one in my office at work, and I have one, you know, I take on the train with me, and I belt the crap out of it in the train? All of you would say that that's not a real pleasant way to live your life. Okay, other people are not getting hurt, but do you really want to kind of let anger overwhelm you like that every time you experience it? You might say that the virtue of meekness has to do with how we regulate our anger. Now, say someone was beating his wife because he used to get angry, and he would say things like, oh, it's not my fault, I was born this way, you know, or for example, it's not my fault, you know, this is how things were done, etc., etc. Say someone said, no, you've got a real problem with anger. Say he said, okay, look, I know how to solve this. Every time I want to beat my wife, I'm going to put a huge cushion around her I'll wrap a mattress around it, then I'll kick the mattress, and look, take it off. No bruises, we've won. Everyone's happy. Technology is trying to do a similar thing in the realm of sexuality. We're trying to say at the end of the day, look, no baby, we've won. But it's much, much more complicated than that. And that's where the virtue of chastity still plays a role in marriage. Celibacy, like we saw here, is not simply defined as not having sex. It's a commitment of one's total self to a cause. That's what makes the celibate and the single person different. You might say the single person is still looking for that good to commit themselves to. The celibate has found that good and they've committed their whole selves to that. It still requires chastity, but it is still a giving of themselves totally, physically and spiritually. Good question. Good question. The handsome man at the back there.
I might ask you two questions. You can choose which one. You mentioned a little about emotions, which is going a bit beyond your talk specifically, but how do the emotions play a role in our spiritual life and our life of virtue? Or it's all a great ideal, but it's hard to live up to the whole time. What do you do if you can't keep it up at some stage in life?
Yeah. Okay, let's see what everyone wants to hear. Hands up, first question. Hands up, second question. Okay, in case anyone's listening to this over the mic, one person put their hand up on the question about emotions, and basically the whole room put their hand up on the second question about struggling with it. You might say that the reason so many questions went up in the reason so many hands went up for the second question is we don't understand the answer to the first question. So we can answer them both simultaneously. It's crucial to understand the fact that we are trying to grow into virtuous people. Now, I know it seems to sound obvious, but we surprise ourselves all the time by this. And you might say it's where pride creeps in. We think we've arrived already, and then we fall and we're so upset with ourselves because we fall, how could I do this? Or now that I've done this, there's no hope for me. There's no progress now. So the first point to remember is to remember that you're on part of a very long journey. And the goal of that journey is sainthood. But you've got to remember that you are confronted by an enormous amount of obstacles right from the moment you took your first breath. We come into a culture which is not friendly to that. We're all imperfect in some ways. For example, on the question of emotions, maybe our friend who was here could have helped us out a bit. But what forms our emotions is still very mysterious for us. And it's often our emotions which initially raise our attention to something. Okay? So long before your intellect is properly formed, you've got a very strong emotional life. What's an example of this? Long before you could write a thesis on what justice is, if someone smacks you up the side of the head, you feel anger. Now, anger isn't a response to a perceived injustice. This means that our emotional life is kind of like the quick-burning fuel which tells us something's going on here. Some good thing is available to me here, or some evil thing is here. And our intellect then goes to work on those emotions to work out what is actually going on here. Now, the difficulty is sometimes we will feel angry when an actual injustice has not taken place. And this shows a gap which has opened up between where we currently are in our emotional life and where we need to be. And that's where my reason steps in and says, oh, hang on a second, I know you're feeling angry now, but you've got to be careful what you do from here on in because they didn't actually mean that, or you're misinterpreting what they've said. And so the virtuous life is about acting on those right emotions correctly so that we're basically shaping ourselves so that the next time we're in that situation, it's a lot easier. To give you an example of how this works, very early on, chastity for many people will be primarily a negative virtue. In other words, it'll be about avoiding certain things which you know are difficult for you. And it's about understanding what is difficult for you, maybe not for the person next to you. So for you, it might be a matter of saying, look, I'm not getting on the laptop anymore, or we're moving the computer into the lounge room. These are the various ways you can use your reason to start trying to shape who you are. Now, compare that place to, for example, a famous canonized saint who used to spend his time begging in the streets to get enough money to go to the local brothel and hire one of the prostitutes for an hour. And someone used to get so enraged with this guy, the hypocrisy of it all. Look at this dropkick, taking people's money and going to the brothel and spending it. And one day when the guy was walking out of the brothel, this fellow lunged at him in anger and killed him. He found out that that person would hire the prostitute for an hour and just say, look, I'm not interested in anything, I just want to talk to you. Do you know what you're really worth? Do you know you don't have to do this? Do you know that there's genuine love you can have? You know? Now, not everyone is at that level of virtue. You know, don't kind of walk off here saying, Christian said, let's go to brothels, who's in on Friday night? Because that would be very imprudent to do that. But it goes to show you the path which is possible. Think, for example, of Mary Magdalene, what she must have seen when she looked up into the eyes of Christ and saw a man standing over her, not looking to get something from her, but looking to help her. You know, this is the role the virtuous life plays. So, concrete examples: make a commitment, and this is dead serious. Make a commitment to go to confession, no matter what. No matter what. Think about this. Think about it. Think of the spiritual life in terms of Rocky's perspective. Doesn't matter how many times you get knocked down, you've only got to get up one more time than you've been knocked down at the end of the day. If at the end of the day you end on a standing up, then you've won the fight. Don't measure the success simply by, well, I've fallen now, that's it. I've already been to confession twice this week, I'm done for. Keep getting up. Say to God, look, God, I'm not going to stop getting up. Therefore, I'm pitting your grace against this sin. Something's got to give. I don't care if I drive myself mad. I'm going to keep getting up. In other words, you're challenging God to give you enough grace so that you overcome those obstacles. A lot of the saints have wondered, why does God allow us to keep struggling with things? And something I found very helpful was that it's often because we would fall into a worse sin if we didn't struggle with that one. You know, one day God will grant you that gift which you're looking for, but you don't want that gift to be a cause of pride. You don't want to think at the day, I did this, how good am I? Look at all these lustful people, you degenerates, wake up to yourselves. No, if you know this took you 30 years to get, when you're talking to the struggling person, there's compassion. You're feeling the journey with them. You know, there's no room for pride when you know you've wrestled for that long. Keep getting up. Take advantage of Father Dwayne here. You know, he's laid down his life to be able to give you that gift, to allow you to start again. You know, think about every time a spouse in a marriage makes a mistake. They go back to the other spouse because that spouse has already said, I'm with you to the end. So if there's any speed humps, come to me, we'll work it through and we'll get through it. Father Dwayne has basically said that to all of us. He's committed to our holiness and is basically saying, look, we're in it together, whatever it is, just come and see us and we'll work it out.
Right, awesome. I'll probably take one more question. Oh, well, we got a few questions. Okay.
There's a conspiracy of questions.
I'm just wondering what the church's view is on masturbation before marriage and in marriage.
Yeah, it's a good point. Here we see, you might say, masturbation is a very difficult issue to struggle with. Why? Because it's there. You know, you don't exactly have to drive across the country to find an occasion for this sin. That's what makes it very difficult, is it's there. What also makes it very difficult is once we start thinking of our sexuality as an itch to scratch, it seems to pose the solution. You know, it seems to be, why go through all this stress right now when it can be over with in 5 minutes? But you can see that for that very reason, it becomes a crucial issue on the path to chastity, because this, you might say, is the home ground where I'm going to decide right now for me whether sexuality is about the capacity to unite with another person or about simply the ability to feel good in a certain way. And it's that issue of masturbation where we go to war with ourselves to find out which side in the long run we're really going to bat for. Because nothing changes when you put that wedding ring on. Nothing automatically changes. You might think that it's suddenly, great, I've got another person, I don't have to use my hand. But it's not, because persons come with things like dreams and ideas and dignity and aren't as readily available as your hand. So the question then becomes, when the clock ticks and all of a sudden the time bomb starts, and I've been developing this idea of I need relief now, marriage is not solving my problems, it's making it worse, because the other person will not allow themselves to be treated as an object for my relief. Hence, you could say that there's going to be an intimate connection between people's struggle with masturbation and the quality of their marital sexual life. And you can see that this isn't something which we can just run a survey off and check. We're getting really to very deep and intimate areas. The real battleground between lust and love in our hearts. So I would say that masturbation is a difficult one to struggle with, but because it is, it's so much more worth the fight because of that. You might say that to step on that one is to send all the other dominoes falling down straight after it. But to try and hide that one and hope the rest fall is, I would say, to lose the battle where it counted the most, and that was in here.
All right, awesome. Whoa. Okay, thanks, Christian. Can I get another round of applause for Christian?
Thank you.
So we got a small token of our thanks for you.
Thank you.
No worries. So that's about all. You can now just go and eat, drink, and be merry. But first of all, I'm going to plug a couple of things.